The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 9th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then the cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice. "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
I'd like to invite any of our younger folks. So there is a podcast that I listen to almost every week. It's done by 3 professors at Luther Seminary, and it takes a deep look into the scripture readings that are coming up in light of current events and the liturgical season. It is helpful and enlightening, and listening to the reflection of these preachers and scholars and theologians has become a habit in my sermon preparation. And one of the things that I appreciate the most about this podcast is the honesty and frankness with which these individuals approach the text. There are not easy answers or pat explanations, and when one of them struggles with something, they confess that struggle to the listeners. And while I was listening to this week's episode, I was actually more deeply reminded of an episode from a couple years ago when the same text came up. One of the contributors made a point about Transfiguration Sunday that I feel myself coming back to every year because it's always true. The Transfiguration, he said, this incredible event on the mountaintop where Jesus' appearance suddenly changes, this event is easy to teach, but it can be really hard to preach. It's easy to teach because there's a clear narrative, a clear set of events. There is symbolism that connects to Jewish history and beliefs. It's easy to say, well, this event has similarities with Moses seeing God on Mount Sinai, and Elijah, and Moses and Elijah are figures many believed had to return before the Messiah would begin. Moses represents the law, Elijah represents the prophets, and both the law and the prophets are fulfilled in Jesus. And as long as we stay in that realm of historical and cultural context, we could talk about the Transfiguration for a long time. What's not so easy, though, is finding what to preach in this story. That is, what about this story has bearing for you and for me, and in how we live our lives when we leave the church building today. Knowing all the facts and the background is valuable, but for me, it's always been, every year, a difficult tie-in. It doesn't sink into my soul necessarily the way that some other stories do. I can easily tell you why the Transfiguration happens the way that it does in our scripture, but I have more trouble sometimes telling just why exactly it matters. Knowing what Jesus did is essential, but so is knowing what it means for me. Now, Lent is bookended by 2 mountains, 2 hills, 2 raised places. The Sunday before Lent, this Sunday, we hear of this mountain of Jesus' transfiguration. On Good Friday, there is another raised place, a hill known as the place of the skull where Jesus is crucified. What we want when we think of Jesus is the Jesus of today. We really want the Jesus of Transfiguration. We want the Jesus who gets the voice of God coming down from heaven, whose clothes and skin change and become dazzling. We want the Jesus who shows without a shadow of a doubt who he is. We want glory. We want this Jesus of glory, but what we get is Jesus of the cross. Jesus who is mocked and tortured, the Jesus who is written off because he chooses suffering for our sake over military might. And finally, when it comes down to it, for me, this is the so what of this text. Because the Transfiguration highlights that we are so much like Peter. Let's build some tents. Let's hang out here. Let's stay in the glory. But Jesus can't do that. The Jesus of the cross is the Jesus that we need and is the Jesus that we are desperate for. Because this is the Jesus who leaves the glory and comes back down the mountain. This is the Jesus who hears our longing for wholeness and peace and healing and comes to bring all of it to pass. This is the Jesus who underwent suffering and death so that there will never be a place where we can go that God has not already been. It is through this Jesus that we see the true and whole glory of God revealed in the unexpected place of the cross. We look at Transfiguration Sunday, we look at this event, and the temptation is to think that the glory displayed there is the real glory. But Transfiguration Sunday is about who Jesus is, the Son of God, the chosen prophet, connected to Moses and Elijah, yes, but that's not all. Jesus is also the one who comes back down to show the fullness of God's glory through the cross. Jesus does not stay on this mountain. We, as the church of this transfigured Jesus, also cannot stay on a mountain of glory. We are called to strike a balance between the mountaintop and the low places. Because the mountaintop has its place. We all have ways of getting to that feeling, getting to that moment. You have it. I know that you probably have a place, an experience, a time in your life when you have felt like you were on that proverbial mountaintop, when you felt the presence of God. For some people, it's in worship. For other people, it might be in private prayer or devotion. For others, it might be when exploring nature. The time or place doesn't matter, but it's those moments of connection and renewal that we all need to sustain us in our life of faith. The mountaintop is not bad. It's pretty great, and we all need it. But we cannot stay there forever. There is work to be done in the world around us. We say that we are God's hands and feet in the world, carrying out the mission of God. People are hurting and in need of healing and comfort, and we're called to search out the broken in our world and our lives and witness to the love of God through our words and actions. And during those times when we are the broken, when we are the hurting, others bring the gospel to us. And so sometimes we need to leave those moments of glory on that first mountaintop to get dirty in the world around us and to meet God at the cross. So Wednesday begins a journey to the cross. And it will take us to the high of Palm Sunday and the deep low and lament of Christ's passion. We will walk it together. We will walk it with Jesus. We will walk it, and in the end, we will gather at that second raised place, at the place of the skull, and remember the words of God. This is my Son, the chosen. Listen to him. Because it is in that moment that the true, full glory of God is revealed to all, even through the horrific, messy way of the cross.